What was the most racist rule at your school? Our principal, Mr. Harris, spent every morning announcement reminding us that speaking any language other than English would result in immediate punishment. One day, he claimed he overheard kids plotting in Spanish, and from that day on, teachers patrolled the hallways, the bathrooms, and even the parking lot listening for anything that wasn't English. One word meant 3 days suspension, plus a note on your permanent record. Mr. Harris loved telling assemblies that English was the language of success. Spanish was all my family spoke at home, so going the whole school day without using a single word of Spanish was exhausting and stressful. My mom stopped coming to school events after a teacher corrected her accent in front of other parents. Kids would hang up on their parents mid-call rather than risk answering in their native language and getting suspended. The Puerto Rican kids, the Vietnamese kids, the Haitian kids, we all walked around like half ourselves, our real voices trapped in our throats. My friend got suspended for calling out to his grandmother in Spanish when she picked him up, and another lost his scholarship for accidentally cursing in French when he stubbed his toe. I kept my phone hidden and silenced because my grandmother, who lived with us and only spoke Spanish, had worsening heart problems. My mom worked at a warehouse 40 minutes away where she couldn't always answer calls, making me the emergency contact. 2 years without a suspension meant I'd perfected the art of swallowing Spanish words before they could escape, even when other kids tried to trick me into responding as a joke. I'd also figured out workarounds that technically didn't break the rule. When my grandmother called during lunch, I'd answer with just mm-hmm and no while she talked in Spanish, making it sound like I was agreeing with someone speaking English nearby. When my grandmother had a minor fall and called during passing period, I had to stand in the bathroom stall, saying nothing but yes and no while she asked me questions, terrified that someone would hear me if I spoke. I tapped out codes we developed where 3 taps meant take your medicine and 4 meant call mom instead. It took 15 minutes to make sure she was okay without actually speaking to her, and I was late to chemistry, but at least I hadn't gotten suspended. I thought I could keep managing these situations with creative solutions until graduation. My grandmother knew about the rule and tried to only call for real emergencies, but sometimes she forgot or got confused. We had a whole system worked out where the neighbor would text me first if something was really wrong, and I'd know to step outside school property before calling back. But emergencies don't always follow your careful plans. During history class, my phone vibrated 12 times in my pocket before I finally checked it under my desk. My neighbor only had this number for emergencies with my grandmother, and she'd never called more than twice before. My hands were shaking as I saw the missed calls climbing to 20, then 25. The second our teacher turned to write on the board, I slipped out into the hallway and called back. My neighbor was screaming in Spanish that my grandmother had collapsed and was barely breathing. She couldn't translate the name of my grandmother's heart medication for the paramedics, and they couldn't understand what she was trying to tell them. The medication had a long name that sounded similar to the one she was allergic to, and in her panic, my neighbor kept mixing them up. I tried our tapping system, but she was crying too hard to understand it. I tried typing the medication name in a text, but she couldn't read my screen to the paramedics while holding the phone to her ear. There was no creative solution this time. My grandmother was dying, and I had to choose between her life and my future at this school. I ran down the empty hallway toward the exit, speaking rapid Spanish, explaining exactly where the medication was kept in the bathroom cabinet, 3rd shelf, behind the vitamins, in the white bottle, not the blue one. My neighbor put me on speaker so I could talk to the paramedics, but they didn't speak Spanish either, so I was translating frantically back and forth while running to my car. The medical terms came out in whatever language I could think of them in first, switching between Spanish and English so fast I couldn't track which language I was speaking, just desperate to get the information across about her heart medication and her deadly penicillin allergy, then back to Spanish to calm my neighbor who kept asking if my grandmother was going to die. I was so focused on getting every detail right that I didn't notice Principal Harris standing by the main entrance, watching me speak the forbidden language that could save my grandmother's life. He had his phone out, recording everything, his face completely unreadable. She survived because the paramedics knew not to give her the medication she was allergic to. The doctor said the allergy information I translated saved her life, that the wrong medication would have killed her in minutes. The next morning, I walked into first period to find Principal Harris sitting at my teacher's desk with his laptop open. The whole class was dead silent. He turned the laptop toward me, showing security footage from the hallway with clear audio of me speaking rapid Spanish on my phone. "Would you like to explain?" he said, pulling out a suspension form with my name already filled in. "Why you thought you were exempt from our English-only policy?" My legs felt like concrete blocks stuck to the floor. The whole class stared at me while Mr. Harris tapped his finger on the suspension form that already had my name written in black ink. My mouth went completely dry like I'd been eating sand. He wasn't really asking me anything. He was putting on a show for everyone else. The laptop screen kept playing the security footage on repeat, showing me running down the hall with my phone pressed to my ear. My hands started shaking when I tried to speak. My grandmother was dying and the paramedics couldn't understand which medication would kill her. Mr. Harris held up his hand to stop me before I could explain more. "Emergencies don't override school policy. You could have found another way." His voice stayed perfectly calm, but his eyes looked at me like I was just another problem to file away. The suspension form sat there between us like a guilty verdict that had already been decided before I even walked in. "Can I call my mom to explain what's happening?" He shook his head slowly. "She'll need to speak English during school hours or bring an approved interpreter." The whole class shifted in their seats, but nobody said anything. Even calling for help had rules attached to it. My hands shook harder as I slipped my phone back into my pocket. Mr. Harris opened his desk drawer and pulled out a thick packet of papers with yellow highlighter marks all over them. He pushed it across the desk toward me. "Your disciplinary hearing is scheduled for Thursday at 10 a.m., and you have the right to bring a parent or guardian, but all proceedings will be conducted in English only." The bell rang and everyone grabbed their bags and rushed out without looking at me. Their eyes stayed glued to the floor or their phones as they squeezed past my desk. Mr. Harris packed up his laptop and walked out, leaving me standing there alone with the packet in my hands. The hallway was already filling up with kids heading to second period when I finally made my legs move. Whispers followed me down the hall like a swarm of bees. Some kids pulled out their phones to text while staring at me. Others made jokes loud enough for me to hear about getting sent to Spanish jail. My face burned hot, but I kept walking and tried to look like I didn't care. The weight of what just happened pressed down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. Before I could get to my next class, the office secretary appeared in the hallway and told me to follow her. She led me to the administrative office and pointed at a hard plastic chair near the window. "You're excused from classes today, but you must remain here until dismissal." The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, making my head hurt. I pulled out my phone to text my neighbor about my grandmother. My fingers fumbled over the keyboard as I typed, asking if she was okay after yesterday's emergency. The thought of her being alone at home made my stomach twist into knots. The secretary handed me a form and told me to write my official statement about the incident. The blank lines stared back at me. Everything sounded wrong when I tried to explain life and death situations in formal English. I kept starting over because my grammar mistakes made me look guilty of something worse than speaking Spanish. The secretary watched me struggle without offering any help. Her eyes followed my pen as I crossed out another sentence and started again. The words wouldn't come out right no matter how many times I tried. After my 5th attempt, I asked if I could get a copy of Mr. Harris's recording from the hallway. The secretary didn't even look up from her computer. That's internal evidence that students can't access. My stomach dropped like I was falling off a cliff. They had proof I couldn't even see or respond to properly. The unfairness made my jaw clench so tight my teeth hurt. Another student sitting across from me waiting for something leaned over and whispered that the hallway cameras have audio recording. I hadn't known that before. My brain started racing as I pulled out a notebook and started writing down exact times and locations. I tried to remember who else was in that hallway when I ran past. Maybe someone else saw the emergency written all over my face. Maybe they heard me crying as I ran. Interesting conversation happening here. I wonder what they're really thinking. The other student got called into the counselor's office before I could ask more questions. My phone buzzed with a text from my friend saying people were already spreading rumors. They were saying I planned to break the rule on purpose to make some kind of political statement. The lie was spreading faster than I could possibly correct it. More texts came in asking if I was trying to be some kind of hero, or if I just wanted attention. I felt sick knowing how twisted the story was already becoming. My thumb hovered over the reply button, but I couldn't think of what to say that would make any difference. I turned off my phone notifications and shoved it deep in my backpack. The secretary kept typing on her computer while I sat there with a half-finished statement form in my lap. The clock on the wall moved so slowly, I thought it might be broken. Other kids walked past the office window and stared at me like I was an animal in a zoo. Some pointed and whispered to their friends. The form still sat there mostly blank because nothing I wrote could capture what really happened. How could I explain in perfect English grammar that my grandmother's life mattered more than their stupid rule? My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I pulled it out to see a text from my neighbor saying my grandmother was stable but really weak and kept asking for me in Spanish over and over. The relief hit me so hard I had to grab the desk, but then the guilt came right after because I should have been there with her instead of sitting in this stupid office. She probably didn't understand why I wasn't home yet, and that made my chest hurt. I shoved the form back across the desk unsigned and walked out while the secretary called after me that I couldn't leave without permission. The halls were empty during class time, and my footsteps echoed as I headed to my locker to grab my stuff. A note taped to my locker said the guidance office had scheduled me an appointment tomorrow morning with Orlando Frey, some counselor who supposedly helped bilingual students with these situations. Maybe someone in this building actually understood what we were going through, but I wasn't holding my breath. That evening, while Mom and I sat at the kitchen table trying to eat dinner, an email popped up on my phone with the official hearing details. 3-day suspension, permanent record notation, and review of my enrollment status. My hands went cold when I read those last 2 words because they could actually kick me out of school for this. Mom read it over my shoulder, and her face went white as she grabbed my hand and squeezed it tight. The next morning, I showed up early for my appointment with Orlando Frey, who turned out to be this quiet guy with glasses who actually listened instead of just talking. He explained that the school had broad authority, but there were district policies about discrimination they might be violating with this English-only rule. He couldn't promise anything would help, but he gave me a list of what to document and how to present it at the hearing. His office felt safer than anywhere else in the school had felt in 2 years. During lunch, I called the hospital from the parking lot and asked if they could send letters from the ER doctor and paramedics about how my translation prevented a fatal medication error. The administrator said she'd try, but it might take a few days to get everything on official letterhead and have the right people sign it. I wrote down her name and direct number in case I needed to follow up. My phone started blowing up with notifications because someone had posted about my situation on social media, and now everyone had opinions. Half the comments said rules are rules, and I knew what would happen. The other half said saving a life matters more than any stupid policy. The notifications made me dizzy, so I deleted the apps off my phone because I didn't want to be anyone's political symbol or debate topic. After chemistry, my teacher asked me to stay behind, and once everyone left, she quietly admitted the language policy felt wrong, but teachers could lose their jobs for speaking up about it. She pointed to a page in the student handbook showing the district's own non-discrimination language that seemed to contradict the English-only rule. Her hands shook a little as she showed me where to find it online and told me to make copies. That evening, a guy named Ruben Guidry from some legal aid group called after my mom reached out to them for help. He explained that Title VI protects language minorities, but schools often claim safety exceptions to get around it. Any federal complaint would take months to process, way past graduation, so the system moved slower than my life did. The next morning, I went to the main office and requested a Spanish interpreter for my hearing, since my mom struggled with formal English and legal terms. The secretary said they don't provide interpreters for disciplinary hearings, only for special education meetings, and I made sure to write down her exact words. Mike Fair, the assistant principal, pulled me aside in the hallway and suggested I just take Saturday detention instead of fighting this whole thing. He looked tired, like he'd had this conversation before, and knew exactly how it would end for kids like me. The easy path tempted me for about 2 seconds before I remembered my grandmother's face when the paramedics were trying to help her, and nobody could understand what she needed. I told Mike thanks, but no thanks, and kept walking to class. The rest of the week crawled by with teachers looking at me weird, and kids whispering when I walked past. Some of them tried to talk to me in Spanish as a joke to see if I'd respond and get in more trouble. I kept my mouth shut and my head down, counting the days until the hearing. My grandmother called twice, but I let it go to voicemail because I couldn't risk anyone hearing me speak Spanish on the school property again. Mom took time off work she couldn't afford to help me prepare for the hearing, going through the handbook and printing out everything Orlando had suggested. We stayed up late organizing documents and practicing what I would say in English, even though it felt wrong explaining in English why speaking Spanish saved a life. The morning of the hearing, my stomach hurt so bad I could barely eat breakfast, but Mom made me try anyway. My phone buzzed with an email notification while I was getting my papers together. The scholarship committee had sent a message about reviewing all disciplinary records before making final decisions. My hands went cold reading that they'd be checking my permanent record next week. This wasn't just about missing 3 days of school anymore. 4 years of straight A's and perfect attendance could mean nothing if that suspension went through. I shoved the phone in my pocket and grabbed my backpack, trying not to think about how college might disappear because I spoke Spanish to save my grandmother's life. The hearing was set for 2 o'clock, but first I had to get through a whole school day. At lunch, I got a text from Mom that my grandmother was released from the hospital. She needed someone watching her constantly now and checking her medications every 4 hours. I spent the rest of lunch period setting up phone alarms and texting our neighbor about check-in times. The chemistry test was tomorrow and I hadn't studied at all. Everything felt like it was piling up at once. During study hall, an email from Ruben popped up on my laptop. He'd been researching and found that recording hallway audio might violate state privacy laws, but he also said courts usually gave schools lots of power for safety reasons. Every legal argument had a counter-argument that helped the school. The whole system seemed set up to protect them, not us. My phone vibrated with a text from a classmate I barely knew. She'd sent a shaky video that showed Principal Harris standing by the entrance with his personal phone pointed right at me while I was on my emergency call. This wasn't just security cameras catching something by accident. He deliberately recorded me himself, like he'd been waiting for me to mess up. I forwarded the video to Orlando right away, my fingers shaking with anger. That night I stayed up making a timeline of everything that happened. Orlando came over and helped me write down every single timestamp and detail I could remember. He kept crossing out parts where I wrote how I felt and made me stick to just the facts. The times, the places, who said what, who was there. No opinions, no emotions, just cold, hard facts that nobody could argue with. Working on it actually helped calm my nerves a little. The next day during lunch, I walked around quietly asking Vietnamese and Haitian kids about their experiences with the language rule. Most were scared to talk, but a few wrote anonymous statements for me. One girl lost her National Honor Society spot after answering her mom's call in Vietnamese. A Haitian boy's parents stopped coming to his games because they were afraid of speaking French by accident. The stories kept coming, each one showing the same pattern of fear and lost opportunities. After school, I collected more statements, and the picture got bigger and uglier. That evening, I sat at my computer typing up a formal grievance to the district. I cited discrimination and denial of interpreter services, using all the legal terms Orlando had taught me. My hands shook as I attached all the evidence and hit send. There was no taking it back now. I was officially a troublemaker in their system. The next morning, Principal Harris started showing up everywhere I went. He was in the hallway when I got to my locker. He walked through the cafeteria right when I sat down. He even stood near the bathroom when I needed to go. Each time I saw him, I texted Orlando the time and location, keeping a record of everything. The surveillance made it hard to breathe, like the walls were closing in. During lunch, my phone rang with Mom calling. School cares more about catching kids speaking Spanish than actually teaching them chemistry. Priorities so backwards they could win a gymnastics medal for that twist. Her boss had told her that if she missed any more work for school meetings, he'd cut her hours. We needed every dollar she made to pay for my grandmother's new medications. I told her not to come to any more meetings, but she refused. She said she wasn't letting me face this alone no matter what it cost us. Before chemistry class, my chest got so tight I couldn't breathe right. The room started spinning and I had to grab the desk to stay standing. The nurse said it was a panic attack and asked if I wanted to call someone to help me calm down. I sat there